The Wind Boy. Ethel Cook Eliot. Chapter 1. The Girl from the Mountains. In a spring twilight, a young girl was walking down a village street. Just at a glance, anyone might know she was a stranger there. For one thing, her dress was like nobody else's. It was the color of sunlight on a brown forest path when the sun is low behind the trees, and it was made tunic fashion with a belt of twisted grasses. Under the tunic was a white guimpe of sheerest, softest lawn, gathered at the neck and wrist with a silver cord. To add to the strangeness, she wore on her feet sandals that looked as though she had made them herself out of bark and braided weeds. In one hand she swung a loosely tied bundle wrapped in purple. Her head was hatless, and though she was a tall girl, quite grown up, her hair was blowing free in soft curls almost to her shoulders, the color of a forest brook when the sun finds it. Do you wonder that people turned to look after her? But the strange girl never noticed the surprised glances of the villagers or the cries of the children. She walked along, her head up, her clear eyes eager, for she had an errand in this village that made her feet step lightly and lighted her face with an expectant smile. She walked along quickly and smiling until, almost at the edge of the village, she came to a white mansion, bowered in gardens and looking as out of place in its setting as she herself looked, only in a different way. There she paused, as who came to the village ever failed to pause, to look up at the mansion's graceful arches and vine-covered walls. And well she may stare, thought the village policeman who was coming toward her along the street. She looks countrified enough never to have seen such a house as that one. The strange girl spoke to the policeman just as he was about to pass her. "Can you tell me, please, who lives in that house?" she asked. The policeman stopped, rather glad of an opportunity to awe the country girl. "Yes, I can tell you. A very famous artist lives there. He's rich, too. You may have read about him in the papers. It's a nice house," the strange girl said. "I like it like that, so tall and white, with the tree shadows on it." The policeman didn't want to hurt her feelings, but he couldn't help laughing. "Tree shadows, my eye! Why, the architect, the artist, got to draw the plans is as famous as the artist. People come from all over just to look at that house, and those gardens off at the back, too. They run down almost to the woods, gardens and lawns and terraces. A little later in the summer those gardens are a marvel, better than a flower show. It looks a good place for children to play. There's as much lawn as there is garden." "Was it planned for children?" "No. Well, for one child, a little perhaps. His little granddaughter. She's a lonely little thing. She mostly plays alone." "Why?" asked the strange girl, surprised. "That's just the way it is. How do I know why? Snobbery, perhaps, or fear. She's all the artist has left in his family, and he's over-careful of her. You're from the country, aren't you?" "Yes, I am from the country," said the strange girl. "I'm from the mountains." As the strange girl said this, for the first time the policeman's eyes met and looked directly into the girl's eyes, and at that instant something odd happened to him. He thought that here, at the end of Main Street, he was standing all by himself on the pavement and holding conversation with the purple mountains that lifted their heads far off above the roofs of the artist mansion. But he was not alone, of course, for here was the country girl in her brown tunic and funny sandals, and he was looking straight into her eyes. It must have been in her eyes he saw the mountains. The notion went as quickly as it had come. "But who lives in that tiny house?" asked the strange girl. She had turned away her eyes. That little brown cottage. Foreigners, refugees, a mother and her 2 children. The father went away to the war, and then they were driven out of their own village and country by the enemy. They came here, and the mother got factory work in the city. "That is the house I am looking for, I think," said the strange girl. "I am answering the mother's advertisement for a general housework girl. See, here it is." She pulled out of her pocket a clipping that read, "Wanted, a girl for general housework, who can do plain cooking and likes children. Small wages, but a good home." "Small wages? I should think so," laughed the policeman. "Much good it'll do you to answer that ad. Why, the woman hardly earns enough to feed themselves, and wants to hire a cook. That's refugees for you. They don't make sense. The ad makes sense, though, and I've come a long way to answer it." As the strange girl passed him to go to the little brown house, again the policeman saw distant purple mountains in her eyes. He stayed for some time looking after her, wondering at himself. The little brown cottage stood in a tiny garden with a tall, thick hedge of lilac bushes between it and the artist's lawn. The strange girl crossed the street and went in at the low swinging gate. The door was around at the side of the house, and to get to it the strange girl had to pass the open sitting-room windows. She stopped to look in. It was a little low, oblong sitting-room she saw, with thin golden-brown curtains at the windows and golden-brown cushions on the chairs. There was very little furniture, and what there was worn and rickety, but it was a happy room for all of that. There was a shelf of books on the wall, and under it a square table with a bowl of bright tulips, purple, red, white, in the middle of it. In a minute, as the strange girl stood there, a little girl and boy came in from the kitchen, carrying spoons and plates to set on the table for supper. The little girl was 8 years old, and her brother was 9. You could see easily enough that they were foreigners. In that village, even in the country, there was no such copper-colored hair. The boy's head was a thick mop of burnished copper. The girl's hair was copper-colored too, and soft as cobwebs. It was braided in 2 smooth pigtails that ended just halfway down her back. Both were dressed in dull blue flannel that looked as though it had once been the same piece, and indeed this was true, for last year, when they were living at home in their own village, it had been one of their mother's prettiest dresses. The little girl was smiling as at some secret, happy thought. "Okay," she said, softly, suddenly, as they were putting the things about on the table. "Let's not wait for Mother to make the porridge. Her train's so late. I'm sure I can manage perfectly. I've watched her make it so many times." "Of course you can manage, so could I, but Mother doesn't want us to light the stove. You know that as well as I do." "Oh, but if it were to surprise her. She does come home so tired, and to find a nice hot supper." But Kay shook his head. "I'm sure it would make her tireder if we did what she's told us not to do." The little girl's face fell. The strange girl, leaning in at the open window, heard her sigh. "Oh, don't sigh, little copper-haired girl," she suddenly cried. "I'm quite old, almost grown up, you see, so I can light the fire, and we will surprise your mother." Both children turned in amazement toward the window, and the strange girl leaning there saw something besides amazement in their faces. It was fear. Why should they be frightened by a friendly voice? She wondered. Of course, the minute they saw her smiling eyes, their fear vanished. "Oh, will you?" cried the little girl. But Kay asked, "Who are you?" "My name is Nan, and I have come all the way from the mountains answering your mother's advertisement for a general housework girl, but perhaps she has found one." "No, no one has even come to talk to her about it. You see, they all know how poor we are." "Then may I come in, please, and we will get supper to surprise her." The little girl, standing wide-eyed and eager behind her brother, now cried, "Oh, splendid, do come in. I'll open the door," and she started quickly toward it. But Nan, the stranger girl, laughed and, putting one hand against the window casing, leapt lightly over the sill into the room. That surprised the children. Why, Kay himself, who was strong and supple, could never have done that. But Nan had done it as though it were nothing. "You are Kay," she said to the boy, "for I heard her call you that. But what is your name?" she asked the little girl. "Gentian." "Gentian, that is a flower." Nan bent down and looked into the eager upturned face in the twilight of the room. "And you are like a gentian. Have you ever seen one?" "No, we haven't," Kay answered for his sister, "but father has, in a country where he traveled once. They are blue like gentian's eyes, and though they grow among stones on windy hillsides, they are quiet like the sky." Father always said that one small gentian had all the sky folded around in its soft fringes. It is a special magic that makes that possible, gentian magic. Cold and frost do not scare it, for it has the whole sky held close to give it company and heart. "Yes," said Nan, "the gentian is like that." "Are you like that?" she asked the little girl. But Gentian laughed. "The cold scares me," she said. "Last winter it was dreadful. That was before Mother got work in the factory and could buy us warm coats." "Then," Kay interrupted, "Father says she's like that." But Gentian did not listen. "Let's get supper," she cried. "How glad I am you're here, Nan. Mother will be so surprised." When the stove was lighted in the kitchen and the kettle put on to boil, Kay suddenly said, "It's queer to have you so friendly, Nan, and not laughing at us at all. Everyone else here in this country seems to be laughing. It's because we're foreigners, I suppose. Once I told a boy at school about Gentian's name and what it means. He laughed and laughed. I'm careful now not to say the things I think to anybody." "But you say the things you think to me. You began right at once to say them. How was that?" Kay looked at her, wondering himself. "You're different from anybody I've ever seen before," he said then. "I forgot that you are a stranger." Nan still looked at him, and then his eyes suddenly wavered from those clear, quiet ones that were so kind. He bent his head and turned away. "You must not like him any the less when I tell you that he had turned away to hide his tears." They were strange, happy tears. How splendid to have a friend, and all so suddenly in this alien village. When the porridge was made and a salad to go with it, Nan and the two children went back into the sitting room to wait for Mother. It was dark now, but they did not light the lamp or the candles. They sat on a bench under the window, Nan in the middle, and she began to tell them stories that she had learned in the mountains. But she had hardly begun when there came a rustle and a scratching, odd little sounds at the window above their heads. Both children sprang up and faced about, but Nan only turned her head. There, dim in the falling darkness, was the weirdest face. Little green eyes, a huge nose, terribly frowning brows and pointed brown ears. It was enough to frighten anybody. The children backed away toward the other side of the room, silently terrified, but Nan, to their amazed horror, made a grab toward the face. It ducked away just in time and vanished from the window. The children heard its feet running lightly away around Kay's flower beds in the garden. Then Kay cried. It never came right up to our window before. Gentian ran to Nan and hid her face against her breast. It was an ugly face, Nan comforted, but it's only a mask. Somebody has put on to frighten you. Anyone can see that. Who is it? Yes, it is a mask, Kay agreed. I was the first of all the children to know that. They don't believe me yet about it, but it's just as scary for all its being only a mask. I don't see how, Nan said sensibly. Who wears it? Why, that's the scary part. Nobody can find out. Well, it looked to me as though it was a child. Some little mischief or other, Nan said. No, it can't be. Why can't it be? Because if it was any child in the village, it would have been caught before now. It has been frightening children for days. One very little boy, when he saw it on the street in the dusk, was made sick. Our teacher and the artist who lives next door, and even the policeman himself, say it must be caught, and when it is caught, punished. But I think even the policeman is a little afraid of it. Where do the children see it usually? It's always on this street in front of our house or the artist's, and it's always just at twilight. It never came into our yard before, though, and right up at the window. And it hadn't better do so again, Nan said soberly, unless it wants to get caught. Frightening people isn't any way to have fun. She walked suddenly back to the window and leaned out of it. The ugly thing is not in the garden, she said. Let's just forget it until it comes again. Then we'll catch it and pull off its mask. But there's someone at the gate. She's coming up the path. That was Deetra, of course, the children's mother. They rushed to the door to meet her. Chapter 2. The Robe of Starry Brightness. Deetra was surprised enough to find the strange girl from the mountains waiting for her in her house, but the children would not let Nan explain. They were wild with happy excitement. It was like the old days back in their own village when it was Hazar, their father, who went out to work, and Deetra stayed at home with her children. They often greeted him with surprises. "Oh, Mother, we have such a surprise. Shut your eyes, say not a word." Deetra sat down on the bench under the window. Her train had been late and so crowded that she had stood in it all the way from the city. She was very tired and glad to shut her eyes, but when she had done so, it was as though a light had gone out in the room, for Deetra's eyes were so bright with mother love. The children missed them when they were shut. Then Kay and Gentian and Nan, and on tiptoes, hurried into the kitchen and brought in the supper. When they had brought it in, and Nan had lighted the lamp and the 3 candles that stood on the bookshelf, and set the bowl of tulips exactly in the middle of the table, the children both cried at once, "Now you may look, Mother darling, look." And when the tired mother opened her eyes and saw the warm food nicely cooked, and the flowers and the candles and the children's shining faces, she was as surprised and as happy as they could have hoped. But she looked at Nan in a very puzzled way. "Who are you?" she asked. "You have been very kind to my children and to me. You do not live in this village." "I have just today come from the mountains," said Nan. "I am answering your advertisement for a general housework girl. I hope I'll do." Deetra's first surprise was as nothing to her surprise now, but she was silent for a minute. "Oh, she will do, she will, Mother," cried Kay and Gentian, in one breath. You will let her stay. Deidre passed her hand across her eyes. I am not dreaming, she asked. At that how the children laughed. Asleep, not you. Why, mother, you are as wide awake as we, and she may stay. All this time Nan stood there looking as eager and hopeful as the children. Her face, her eyes, her half-grave smile all said, Yes, may I stay? At last Deidre spoke, looking up wonderingly at the strange girl. But I can't pay you, not what you're worth. Why, you aren't the sort of maid I had in mind at all. You are a superior person somehow. At that Nan shook her head. No, I am just a girl from the mountains, she said. I'm sure you can pay me all I need. And you are so young, said Deidre then. How old are you? 15, 16. Back in the mountains we do not reckon our age. I do not know how old I am, but I know that I am old enough to do plain cooking and keep a house clean, and look after the children. I have come a long way, Deidre, to answer your advertisement. Deidre did not at that moment think it strange that Nan should call her by her Christian name. She only remembered to wonder at it later. I shall be very happy to have you stay, she said. If only you are sure you really want to, you see. It is not just the small wages I can pay, it is also that we do not have many nice things to eat. Will you be contented with almost nothing but soups and salads? Cakes and sweets we seldom have, for I'm quite poor. The children were holding their breath. Suppose, oh suppose, this new, gay, beautiful friend should go away to a house where there were better things to eat and more wages, to a fine place like the artist over the hedge. Their mother might have heard their thoughts, for she added, The artist who lives in the beautiful mansion across the hedge could very probably make a place for you. His housekeeper is always engaging new maids and discharging old ones. But the children threw themselves upon her. You are going to stay and live with us and be with us forever, they cried. Mother really means that. Don't listen to anything else. Bring another plate and cup then, said Deidre. The table is set for 3 only. I have set a place for myself in the kitchen, Nan answered. You have your children only at night. I shall be happy with them much of the day. Is there anything else you need? Deidre looked at the table carefully. No, you have thought of everything. Have you plenty for yourself? Yes, thank you. Then Nan went out, softly closing the door into the kitchen. The supper was delicious. Not even back in their home town had food tasted any better. How grateful Deidre was to have found such a meal ready and perfect for her. Always before, when she got home from the factory, no matter how tired she was, she had had to prepare supper herself. While they ate, the children told their mother all about the coming of Nan, how she had jumped in over the sill, and how she had frightened away the masker that had come right up to their very window, and stood looking in. She wasn't a bit afraid. She just grabbed at the mask and almost caught it. But at the recounting of this adventure, Deidre was troubled. The masker in our garden, she exclaimed. Oh, why doesn't the policeman or someone catch it? It is wicked to frighten children so. I should think the artist would do something. He himself has a little girl to be frightened. She was really talking to herself, but the children heard. Oh no, Janetian said. Rosemary will never be frightened. Her nurse and her governess are always with her. The masker would keep away from them, and at night she sleeps in her high nursery up above the treetops. A big girl like that to sleep in a nursery, but she will not be frightened. Oh, I hope she is never frightened, Kay said almost under her breath, for Kay, although he had never even spoken to the artist's little granddaughter, felt that he knew her and liked her very much. When he caught glimpses of her from the car in which she went riding in the charge of her governess, or times when she looked down at him from her high nursery window when he had reached the top of the cherry tree in their garden, her merry brown eyes seemed always to be saying the same thing: "I like you ever so much. If only we were allowed, we might be such splendid playmates. I have read so many exciting stories that I want to tell you. I like sea stories best, stories of pirates and runaway boys and hidden treasure. You do too, I know, and I want you to let me climb your cherry tree. You are splendid at tree climbing. Yesterday I thought you were falling, but you caught yourself. Oh, I do want to play with you." How even such merry brown eyes as Rosemary's were could say all that in a passing flash, I do not know, but Kay was always sure they did. And afterwards Rosemary said he was right, she was thinking all that and much more. So now he repeated in a whisper, "Oh, I hope she is never frightened." "Well, I don't want her to be frightened either," Dietra answered, for she had heard. "But just because his own little granddaughter is safe is no reason why the artist should go on letting all the other little boys and girls in the village be frightened. It is always on this street near his house. He could do something, but he has done something," Kay assured her. "In school today, Miss Todd told us that the artist had promised that the masker was to be caught and no child frightened by it any more. He is going to give the policeman a lot of money when he catches it, and then the masker is to be punished. Miss Todd warned us in case it might be one of us. Imagine." Dietra sighed. "I am glad that something is being done. They know then what a shame it is to let children be frightened." At that minute Nan came in to clear the table. The children helped her, moving back and forth with her from the sitting room to the kitchen. When all was cleared, the floor brushed, and the table set back against the wall, they went into the kitchen to do the dishes. "Leave the door open," Dietra called. "I like to hear your voices." Then she went up to her room and soon came down with something in her hands. Nan, standing at the sink, could see through the open doorway that it was a little statuette made of plastilina. Dietra set it on the table under the lamp, and drawing up a chair began to work on it with her fingers and a little tool, sharp at one end, blunt at the other. "This is the Wind Boy," Kay confided. "Mother is an artist." He said it proudly. Dietra heard and looked up to smile at him. "It may be the Wind Boy some time," she said a little wistfully. "I am sure he is lighter and freer and more joyous than I've made him, though. Ever so much so, the real Wind Boy. He should be as happy and as light as air, but somehow he won't come right." Then to herself she added softly, "I am too tired, perhaps, at night after the day's work. I might make him right in the morning, but this is the only time I have." Nan had left the dishes and drawn near. She stood above Dietra, looking down at the little figure. The Wind Boy was not like any human boy that you have ever seen. His hair grew in thick, soft curls over his head. His eyes were far apart, wide, and should have been happy, but somehow they were touched with sadness. His dress was a fluttering tunic, not quite to his knees, and his body was slim and supple. High above his head were spread wide, strong, swift wings. His feet were just leaving the earth in flight, and his face seemed to say, "Yes, I am coming." Yes, all this was true of the Wind Boy, even if he was just a little statuette of plastilina. It was a very beautiful little statuette, But even though it was so beautiful and wonderful, Dietra and even the children knew that it could become ever so much more beautiful. "Why isn't he happier, Mother?" asked Kay, who had drawn near too. "If I could fly, I'd be happier than that." "If I could fly," Janician said softly, "I'd fly with more of me, with all of me." "I don't know," puzzled Dietra, passing her hands across her eyes. "I wish I could make him happier and make all of him ready to fly." But Nan said nothing, though she bent down and looked for a long time earnestly and with great interest at the Wind Boy. After a time she went back to her dishes. "Mother may show the Wind Boy to the artist, if it ever comes as she wants it," Kay told her as he wiped the last spoon and handed it to Janician to put away. "But she doesn't want anyone to speak of that yet. It is a secret." "But if it is a secret, why do you tell me?" asked Nan. "Oh, but somehow I didn't think not to you." What Kay meant was that Nan was already so dear to him and Janician that for a minute he did not remember that she was not one of them. But Dietra had heard from the next room, and now she lifted her eyes from her work on the Wind Boy to say, "Don't bother, Kay, this time. You didn't mean to let my secret out, I know, and Nan will remember not to tell. It is just the village people. We don't want them to laugh at us, that is all." "But why should they laugh?" asked Nan. "I don't know," Dietra answered, "but they do, all the time. Our ways are not their ways, I suppose." Just then Nan noticed that Janician's eyes were beginning to droop. "Let us go to bed and leave the house quiet for your mother to try to get the Wind Boy right," she suggested. "Yes, do go to bed, children dear," agreed Dietra. "Tomorrow is Saturday, and you will want to play hard. And Janician, you may show Nan her room in the attic. I am sorry that it isn't a nicer one." But when Janician and Kay had taken Nan up to the attic room, she thought it was very nice indeed. "You will think so too. But first I must tell you about this little brown house that was set down like a stepping stone to the artist's magnificent one. Downstairs there were only the kitchen and the sitting room and a little hall. Upstairs Dietra's and Janician's room, and back of that Kay's room, and above these two rooms the attic, a long low room with a slanting plastered ceiling, and a dormer window at each end, with their sills almost on a level with the floor. Under one sloping side stood a narrow bed, painted white. By one of the windows was a chest of drawers, and in front of the other window a low three-legged stool. By the bed lay a strip of faded blue rug. That was all there was in the room. But when Nan had put the candle on the top of the chest of drawers, the light gleamed pleasantly on the white walls and ceiling, and the faded blue rug by the bed shone like a bit of dim water. Kay had carried up Nan's bundle, wrapped carelessly in its purple covering. It was very small, he thought, to hold all of Nan's wardrobe. Why, most people who went anywhere to stay took a trunk along at least. He laid the bundle on the white coverlet of the bed. "What a beautiful room!" exclaimed Nan, looking all around. And Janician and Kay did see suddenly that it was a very beautiful room. How it happened I don't know. Perhaps it was so beautiful because the night had got in through the windows, which were both open. The room now was beautiful like the spring evening, only that it was smaller. The spring night air, sweet with the smell of budding cherry blossoms and spring flowers and grass and earth, stirred against their faces, and Janician thought, "It is just as though we were out in some little room in the sky, and all the spring fragrance coming up to us there." Then she noticed the purple bundle that Kay had put on the bed. "Oh, may we see into your bundle?" she begged. Perhaps it was rude to ask that, but Janician did not mean to be rude, nor Kay when he echoed, "Oh yes, do let us see what you brought." Nan laughed. "Little curiosities. Yes, you may undo it. Janician, it is my clothes." So Janician, with eager fingers, undid the knotted purple cloth, and opened it on the bed, spread out Nan's things. There was another dress, wood-browned, just like the one Nan was wearing. There was another guimpe, too, sheer, soft and white, gathered with silver strings at the neck and wrist. There was a change of underlinen, very white and soft too, and there was a nightgown. But Janician did not know that it was a nightgown, nor would you. It was the color of the spring night sky, faint blue, and it was scattered through and through with glimmering stars. The stars were not embroidered on the cloth, or woven there, but seemed to shine forth from deep within it, just as the stars show forth in the sky. And though at first glance the robe was only a film, still it was dense, and you could look deeply into it as into the sky. When Janician took it up and spread it out on the bed, the scent of pines and fir trees and sap and arbutus hung in the air all about her, and she had to look to see that she had anything in her hands at all, for the robe had no weight. For a minute Janician thought that a strip of the sky must somehow have blown into the window and onto the bed. "What is this?" she asked wonderingly. "It is too beautiful for a dress." "Yes, it is too beautiful for a day dress, when there is work to be done," answered Nan. "It is my night robe." "Do you wear it to sleep in?" cried Janician, amazed, for it was hard to believe that anyone would put on anything so lovely just to go to bed in. "Yes, I sleep in it, but I never heard of such a nightgown. Back in the mountain we always wear nightgowns like this, but why is it so light? When I pick it up, it's just as though it were winds that lifted out of my hands, and if I held might carry me away with them." "Yes, that is what I feel too, when I wear it," said Nan. Nan was sitting cross-legged on the floor by the low window-sill, her elbows on her knees, her chin in her hands. Her eyes were grave and thoughtful. "I am wondering about the wind boy," she said. "Why should a wind boy be sad?" "Why, just because Mother hasn't managed to get him happier," answered Kay. "He isn't real, you know. He's just a statue." He added these sensible words because Nan was looking so strangely serious about it. "Yes, the little image down there isn't alive, of course," she agreed, looking up at Kay, "but I am wondering about the wind boy himself. I don't like to think that he is sad. A wind boy should not be sad." Even Janician laughed at that. "Why, there isn't any real wind boy," Kay said. "Mother just made him up, you know, because she's an artist and can." But Nan stayed grave. "That's just why there is a real wind boy," she said, "because your mother is an artist, a true one. If she weren't an artist, but just a pretend one, well, then there very likely wouldn't be any wind boy. But don't you yourselves know that since she has made him so true, there must be a truer one, if we could only see him?" No, the children did not know that, but Nan looked so wisely, kind, and beautifully grave there in the open window by starlight and candlelight that they believed now what they could not understand at all. "Do you suppose he is down there in the garden, perhaps looking in at your mother as she works?" Nan wondered. "It's not right that he should be sad wherever he is. when he can fly too," cried Kay, who for this minute believed in the Wind Boy. "How could a boy that could fly be sad?" "Let's find out," said Nan then softly. "If we can find out, perhaps we can help him to be glad again. And if we can make him glad again, we shall be helping Mother too," cried Kay, his eyes bright at the thought. For she would have a happy Wind Boy to copy then, and get him right the way she thinks he ought to be. Janician and Kay both knelt by Nan and looked down into the garden, but though they looked so hard that they almost saw the color of the jonquils in the starlight, they saw no Wind Boy, wandering, troubled, and alone. "We will find him somehow, though," Nan promised, "for he is here somewhere near, or how came that little image? Only now tonight we had better sleep, as she told us to." A little later, when Kay was fast asleep in his room, and Janician was about to fall asleep in her bed in her mother's room, she suddenly said to herself, "Oh, I wish I might give the Wind Boy some of my happiness. I have so much in despair. I am brimmed full like the spring we found in the woods and Mother last Sunday. Nan makes my happiness because she is here. She is up there just above me in her starry brightness. That is what Janician that night and always after called the blue night robe. Perhaps she will float far tonight. It is so light, that gown, but she will come back before morning. Together we three shall find the Wind Boy. He will be happy again. The statue will come right. Mother will be happy." The spring was brimmed full of the most sparkling. But in the midst of these dreamy thoughts, Janician forgot everything and floated off like a petal into sleep.